Kathy, thank you so much for talking with me today. It's really funny because we have a lot of mutual connections when I was doing my research, but it's so funny how small the journalism world really is, you know?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the longer you stay in this business, I feel like the circle gets smaller and smaller. It's a tough business, and I feel like after I graduated from J school many years ago, the pool kind of was relatively big, and then once you graduate and they realize this is a tough business, it
Yeah.
just shrank and it just gets smaller and smaller. But yeah, I think the longer you are with it, it's a marathon, and the longer you're in it, you know a lot of people.
Gosh, that's so true. Well, I want to step it back. I want to talk about baby you, baby Kathy. What were you like as a child, and what was your childhood like?
Yeah. That's a great question. Baby Kathy, I haven't heard that in a while. I don't feel like anymore, but I grew up in Silver Spring, Maryland, so right outside of DC, in the suburbs of Washington, DC. My parents, they are from South Korea, so they are immigrants, and I'm a product of immigrants. And they decided Washington D.C. that area was going to be home for them. My dad, he served in the Korean military, and that's required when you're there and you're born there. If you're a male, you serve for 2 years, and then he was actually able to transition into the U.S. Army. And then he brought my mom, and then they decided to move to the D.C. area. Then they had me, and believe it or not, it's funny because they did not know the culture, the language. They knew a little bit of English coming here, but not much. So when I was born, my first language was not English, it was Korean. So it's kind
Mm,
of ironic how I become an American broadcaster, a journalist, given that,
right.
situation that I was in. When I was in kindergarten, I did not speak any English. It was just kind of like very broken. So they put me in ESOL, which was English for speakers of other languages. And I mean, those days, I feel like they're kind of scarred because when you're young and just vulnerable and you can't communicate with your peers, it just kind of, it kind of shakes you a little bit. So I wanted to get out of that situation pretty quickly, and I was able to graduate from ESOL early on, and then by like first grade or whatever, I was able to speak English fluently. But yeah, Korean was my first language, and English came next. So
And you said that your parents were immigrants. Were they supportive of you going into a job like journalism that's largely thought of as something not really stable?
right. No, I mean, listen, I guess you could say my mom was kind of part tiger mom, and my dad was always supported from the get go. But you've probably heard that expression a lot with Asian families. It's like they either want you to become lawyers, engineers, doctors, something stable, and something where you could make a decent living. Considering, I mean, we didn't come from much, but yeah, I mean, they knew I enjoyed watching the news even at a very early age, so they were supportive in that regard. And I think it's one of those things where they knew my strengths, but after I was able to master English at an early age after Korean, that's kind of where I gravitated towards. So I always kind of had their support along the way. I think there were a couple rumblings here and there where they were thinking, hey, maybe this is not necessarily the path you want to pursue, because they didn't know anyone in their circle who went down this path.
Yeah, and you make a good point. When did you actually realize that journalism was the career path that you really wanted to take?
You know what? It's one of those things. I get this question a lot, and people say, like, is this something that you knew early on when you were young and you
Yeah.
watched the news and you knew you wanted to be like Barbara Walters? And I never had that aha moment. I think I've always loved reading and writing, and I didn't have cable growing up. So I watch a lot of local news. I watched a lot of Sesame Street and PBS and cooking shows like Julia Child and Jacques Pepin. Like, I became a foodie because of them. So I was exposed to that early on, and that like always intrigued me. So I feel like the business, it just made sense, and I kind of gravitated towards it because there were all these different interests, and I just felt like it was kind of a nice mashup of the skills that I was good at, and then all those things kind of piqued my interest as I got older.
But you did decide to go to journalism school, right?
I did, and I went to University of Maryland, so I'm a proud Terp, and I had a couple of different offers at different schools, and honestly, my dream school was NYU, and I had an opportunity to go there. But Maryland made the most sense for me at the time because I had a lot of scholarships. They had a great journalism program. I mean, Connie Chung went there. There were a lot of big talent that graduated from University of Maryland, and New York eventually came later in my life. But yeah, it just made sense for me at the time, and graduated without any debt. So it just, and I was close to home, close to my family. So I just thought, let's go and see how it work out, and it all kind of did.
I'm curious what your experience like was in college because I have a colleague named Chris Williams that went to school with you. Shout out to Chris. And
Yeah.
he said that he had some professors in journalism school that actually weren't very supportive of him going and pursuing an on air career. And I'm wondering what your experience was like in college. And if you did have any of those experiences, how did you not let that get you down and continue pushing forward into a career like this?
Yeah. Well, I love to hear that you know Chris. He is fantastic, and I hope he's doing well if he's listening. For me, I want to say, just looking back, I feel like the professors and the people who were in just kind of that journalism world at the time, they were always pretty supportive with what I wanted to do. They were honest. They gave me very honest feedback, and clearly, I mean, I was green because I didn't know anything about journalism at the time. I was
Sure.
learning like the rest of them, but they all came from. There was former correspondents who I looked up to who were in the business for many years and got out and decided to become professors. But I just kind of soaked everything up, and at an early age and even in college, I felt like I developed thick skin. I mean, I'm sure I heard a lot of like criticism of my work, but they did it out of love because they wanted me to get better. I think it kind of started at school at University of Maryland, and then I just kind of like I said, the skin got tougher over the years because you kind of need that in this business. But looking back, I just felt like everyone really was supportive in what I wanted to do. But I think they told me the realities of this business. You're going to probably work in a very small market in a city that you know nothing about. You're going to be far away from family, working weekends and holidays. And I kind of embraced it. I went into it with an open mind, and I was like, all right, well, if that's what the business requires, I'm going to give it a shot and see what happens.
And that's a good segue. Where did you go first after you got out of college?
Where did I go first? So I was a little bit of a maniac because I wanted a job right away after graduation. Back in the day when we were, I can't believe I'm saying that, but like when I was sending out my demo reels, it wasn't a link. I think it was just a bunch of DVDs. And that
Yeah.
took a lot of effort. I had to edit everything on my own and then burn it onto a DVD and then actually write a cover letter, print out resumes, and like have a nice little package for XYZ news director in the middle
Yeah.
of nowhere, right? And I just
Stick it
kind of
in the manila envelope.
totally, and I just kind of went down the list and was like, where do I want to go? And I specifically chose like the mid-Atlantic stations and just like southern, like mostly on the East Coast because I didn't know anything about the West Coast and I don't have any family ties there. So I kind of like removed that from the equation at the time. So I was looking mostly at the East Coast and I applied everywhere, like dozens. And out of the dozens, if not more, that I applied to, I think I got like 3 calls back.
Such a
And
similar story.
yeah. So, and then one of the very first interviews was in like Macon, Georgia, and like I was terrified. I didn't even know how to get there, but they paid for my flight. I stayed there overnight. Knew nothing about Macon, Georgia, so I was like reading about everything that I could find online about
Yeah.
Macon, Georgia. And then one of the very first questions that the news director asked me was, so, Kathy, what is the difference between a pistol, a handgun, and some other firearm? And I was like, what? And this is someone like I grew up in suburbia and was never around a gun. And I was just so thrown off, and clearly, like, it was just downhill from there. I didn't know how to answer that. But it kind of gave me a snapshot of what I was signing up for. I mean, in this community, I mean, everyone was probably, they were toting a gun, and it was just kind of their world. So I think he just wanted me to realize this is kind of expected of you. This is a kind of the community that you're coming into. And that's just
Yeah.
like the beauty of being a journalist. And I think, looking back, I mean, it's sucks that I didn't get the job and I didn't know the answer, and I kind of felt, just out of place just because I just didn't know. But it kind of it gives you some perspective in the sense that, listen, like now, even at this level, we have to be read in pretty quickly. You have to know a little bit of a lot of things, I guess, and that's just kind of what makes you a good journalist, just being curious and just being well read in on just about everything.
So, which station did you end up going to?
So the station that I ended up going to was the Tri-Cities market, which was WCYB, and it was like a Fox and NBC duopoly, which was also very interesting, but small market. And if you don't know where it is, it's Bristol, Tennessee, Bristol, Virginia. If you're a NASCAR fan, Bristol Motor Speedway is right there. So they had two big events, and I just got exposed to so much, which I didn't grow up around NASCAR, and this was deep in Appalachia. So covered just a little bit about everything, which I was kind of surprised about because I didn't realize I would be exposed to so much in a small market like that. Because I think it was like market like 91 or something. I was getting paid pennies and like, I was just willing to do it, right? And but looking back, it was a 1 year stint, and they gave me a photographer, which is kind of rare. So I had a photographer, and yeah, I mean, I covered. It was like a political year, so Bill Clinton was stumping for his wife. He came through at one point. There was a tornado that came through, so got exposed to covering a natural disaster, um, and just the opioid crisis. I mean, it's a problem now, but it was a big problem then as well. So I was a 20 something brand new reporter covering just a little bit of everything.
Yeah, and had a photographer, which is really rare in a
Really
small
rare.
market.
Yeah. But I mean, but that was short lived because after the Tri Cities, the Bristol market, I went to DC, and it was pretty early on in my career because I was still in my 20s, but I didn't have a photographer. So it was kind of like reverse. So the catch was, yes, you could go back home. We'll give you this opportunity, but you'll be a one-man band. So I
Yeah.
had to revert to all those skills that I learned at school. So shooting and editing and driving around to places. I mean, this was, my backyard. I grew up in the community, so that wasn't too hard. But you had a deadline every day and juggling just a lot of roles. And I was pretty petite at the time, and I was still lugging a massive camera. I mean, technology it didn't speed up by the time I was doing the one man band thing, but everything was just massive. So I was like in heels and doing all these things, and just it was just madness. And but it humbles you. I mean, we all got to start somewhere, and that's kind of where I started.
How long were you in your first market? Because going to Washington, D.C., that's a big jump.
Yeah, that was a big jump. It was in Bristol. I was only there a year, which is really surprising. And I honestly, I was fully prepared to make at least two more jumps before going back home. So the fact that it happened so quickly, like I'm just so blessed that it did happen as fast as it did. But like I said, I had to one man band and do all the things that like the challenges of being one man band. I'm sure you probably had to do it at some point.
Yes.
Yeah, but
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Was that intimidating at all to you, not only going to such a big market, but also going to your hometown?
Absolutely, because I was working with colleagues I grew up watching and looked up to. So extremely nervous, and even at the time, I was still very green because I only had 1 year of experience under my belt, and the stakes were higher because you're in a bigger market. So the product was obviously elevated. You have more resources, and you're surrounded by seasoned reporters and journalists. So it was extremely intimidating, but I had a lot of great colleagues who were kind of in the same boat as me. So we were all kind of in it together, so to speak. I think we all kind of had our war stories every day, just kind of being in the trenches, going out there and dealing with all the pressures of being a one man band.
Yeah, and if my research serves me, Washington, D.C. you didn't stay on the East Coast forever. You jumped all the way to the
Yeah.
West Coast, right?
Yeah, that's how California comes into my journey because, like I said, there was a point when I, didn't really even consider the West Coast for job opportunities because I had no ties. But I was in DC for 6 years, and listen, I got comfortable. I was close to family. I had a good thing going because I was eventually promoted to weekend morning anchor. So I had kind of like this hybrid role. So I was reporting and anchoring
Hmm.
with near friends and family. So, but everything just kind of felt repetitive. I feel like like every year I covered like the same types of stories, and I wanted to see what else was out there. And your contract comes up, and
You wanted that growth.
exactly. And, I got the itch again. I'm like, what else can I do? And I wasn't married at the time. Nothing was really holding me back. So I started applying again. And there was a great opportunity that opened up in Sacramento, California. I knew nothing about Sacramento or California, Northern California, and hit it off with the news director. Flew out there, and I just fell in love with the city. And like people, when I tell them I lived in Sacramento, they kind of like, some of them like scoff a little bit. They're just like, oh, Sacramento. But I think I came at a time when the city was really transforming. I mean, they were becoming a bigger city. Like the way that people describe Sacramento to me, it's like the Midwest in California. It still
Hmm.
has a small town feel. Everyone's still really nice. Things are relatively affordable for California standards. The weather was fantastic. I mean, I look back and I can't, I mean, aside from like a couple of months where things were rainy and a little cold, but I didn't have to worry about my wardrobe. I just like walked out and it was just sunny and beautiful every day. And I was just so in love with just the lifestyle of living out in California, in Northern California especially. And Napa was nearby. So made lots of
Yes.
trips to Napa, Lake Tahoe. So I was exposed to a different part of the country. I was like starving for just that exposure, just kind of embracing the outdoors. So I really love that, just kind of incorporating like that work-life balance.
So, how did NBC News happen?
So when I went to Sacramento, it was the Her station there. It was KCRA, the NBC affiliate, and I feel like I was also once again surrounded by just greatness. I had a lot of seasoned reporters who were at that market, and it was one of those markets. People, there was turnover, but not as much as you might see at a smaller market. A lot of these reporters stay there for a while, and the anchors have been there for a while. So when you're surrounded by talented people, you kind of up your game, and you get better and better. And I feel like in the 4 years I was in Sacramento, I mean, I covered a little bit of everything as well. I covered wildfires, which I knew nothing about. Covered wildfires for the first time, and I covered politics in D.C., but also I was moving to another state capital, so politics in California. There were rallies and protests, and obviously spot news and things like that. So I felt like I elevated my game, and after the 4 years, once again, contract comes up. I was like, what's next? So I had an agent at the time, and I was like, let's see what network life is all about. So it's network or bust, and kind of posed that to my agent, and was like, let's see where this can go. And eventually, NBC came knocking, and I was able to do an interview with them at 30 Rock, and the stars kind of aligned, and I got the job in 2018, August of 2018, and it's been a wild ride. It's been quite a journey, and it's crazy to think that like it's been almost 7 years now. Like at the end of August, that'll be my anniversary. But I just remember just how surreal it was because so shortly after, so they boot camp us when you get hired, kind of rewind a
Yeah,
little bit.
I've
We
heard.
start we start in LA. So I was living in I think Studio City at the time, near the bureau, for a couple of months, and they call it boot camping because you come in with a lot of experience, but they want you to know what it's like to be at the network level and what the workflow is like, because at NBC there's so many different platforms. You have nightly news, you have Today's Show, MSNBC, and now we have the streaming network, NBC News Now, and it wasn't there at the time, but in any case they wanted you to know how things operate and the people who run these shows, and just kind of build that relationship. So I started in LA for a couple of months. So I did the boot camping and then moved to New York. So I moved to 30 Rock, and that was kind of home base for me for, let's see, 3 years. But I had one good year in New York, and then COVID hit, and that changed everything. And that was, I think, for everyone, some of the darkest times. I mean, for me, I was engaged, not married, but my fiance was living in Knoxville, Tennessee. So here I am, pretty new to the network, and covering the craziest headline that we've all, had to deal with. Everyone exited the city. So I still have photos from like that day. I think it was March, right? Like
Yep.
mid-March, when literally the world shut down, and I was doing live shots in an empty Times Square with my crew. So I mean, I want to say for the better part of like 2 years, like we were either doing live shots like at home, for the Today Show, which is just insane, doing live shots at home, or doing it like at field hospitals, or just somewhere, just it was a dark time. And having to cover that, I think, really kind of left an impression on me. I think it just shows you, there are highs and lows in life, and that was definitely an eye-opening experience on so many levels, because we just didn't know what we were getting ourselves into, and there were so many different headlines that came out of it.
So, what was considered home base for you at that point?
At that point, it was Manhattan in my apartment. But there was an option for us. I mean, based on like health concerns and issues. I mean, I didn't have any, so I was like, I'm willing to travel. So life didn't really slow down for me. I mean, I still covered it all, whether it be in Manhattan or elsewhere. I still got on flights, empty flights, where like it's me and maybe like my producer or another passenger. So the news didn't slow down. I can tell you that. So yeah, Manhattan was home base, for 3 years.
And you said that your, at the time, fiance, now husband,
Yep.
lived in Knoxville, Tennessee. How did you maintain that normalcy with a job like you have?
Oh, that's a good question.
And how do you still? It
I
seems
know, I know, I
crazy.
know. I'm still trying to figure it out. But listen, I found an amazing partner who supports what I do, and I think that's so important, because it's a job that takes a lot. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's you get calls at all hours sometimes when there's breaking news. You have to drop what you're doing, and get on you pack a bag and get on a flight within the next hour or two. But Brent, my husband, we've been together 10 years now. We've been together a long time. So he's kind of been on this journey with me from the very beginning. So he knew what it was like in local news. Obviously, I didn't have the travel component. Now it's like I'm on the road a lot, but we were able to make it work even doing the long distance, because eventually we realized we were going to be together physically in the same spot. I always kind of remind myself, especially in this business, like even when I look back to my days in Bristol, like this is just temporary, right? I just like kind of remind myself, this isn't forever. It's something that we kind of have to get through now, but ultimately, things will work out, and it did. So I would make a lot of, I was no stranger on an airplane. So I was booking flights last minute, and seeing Brent in Knoxville, or vice versa, whoever had the time or the capacity to fly. Usually I was the one flying, because I could always come to Tennessee and then fly from here to another assignment. So it's just a lot more miles, I guess.
Yeah. For the aspiring journalist, or the journalist that is in a top market, maybe they're in a top 10 market, and they know that the next move they want is network.
Mhm.
Where do you think they should start? How important is it to get an agent at that point? Can you walk me through what you think would be the best move for them?
Um, I would say, for me, I had an agent. They know the people at the networks, the folks who are kind of like the gatekeepers, essentially. I feel like when at the network level, there is usually a talent division, and the agents kind of have that relationship. And I didn't know where to begin. So having an agent helped in that regard. I basically was leaning on my agent to give me the guidance as to like where to what to do next, really. And so he was able to kind of put me in front of the talent folks, right? But so an agent, I think, yes, if it doesn't hurt, it didn't hurt in my situation. Another tip I would say, if you're in a big market, especially because the industry is changing so fast, and we all kind of have to adapt. I mean, I think it's great that like you're able to do this, like the podcasting. I know social media is just becoming our kind of part of our wheelhouse now. So just being able to adapt, embracing technology, and finding different ways to deliver the news. I mean, clearly you have the foundation. It's just being able to show it in a different way now, and because everyone is consuming news in different ways.
That's so true. Is there anything that you wish you had known before going to the network level?
I never, in my circle, just like moving up the ranks, didn't have anyone, didn't know anyone who was a correspondent. So I couldn't like ask these questions. And, like anecdotally, I'm like, I always heard like, oh, you live out of a suitcase.
Yeah.
You can't buy fruit because you're never home long enough to eat it. Like, don't ever get bananas because you'll never. So I heard these strange things like that. But I want to say, like, it's all kind of true. Living in New York by myself, I mean, there was barely anything in my fridge. Um, yeah, it's hard to, but you have to make it a point to take care of yourself because it's a job that can be physically demanding, physically and emotionally demanding, depending on the type of assignment that you're covering. Because often we're on the road reporting on tragedies and disasters. So yeah, I think if someone told me be mindful of taking good care of yourself because sometimes we're working 14, 18-hour days when it's a breaking news assignment, and then we kind of just have to rinse and repeat depending on how long the story warrants us to be out there.
I know this might be a difficult question for you, but what is a typical news day like for you? Can you run through your schedule?
Yeah, every day it's you just never know because it's and I try to do like coffee dates with people and I always like the caveat or the precursors like listen I can meet you at 11 but I might get a phone call like right beforehand I might have to cancel but on like a busy day, say that I have like a breaking news story, it can start anywhere from like 4 a.m. when I wake up, and then we get ready and just kind of read in from whatever happened overnight if there are any developments on the story, and we go out to our Today Show live shot. So we do our Today Show live shot, and then on to Morning News Now or News Now Daily programs. So a couple more live shots there. We have a little bit of a pause to kind of gather, go to the bathroom, eat, do all the essentials. And then we kind of, shift two kind of takes over the midday. We stay on the same story, but then we're doing live shots throughout the day. And then oftentimes, if it's a big enough story, you are also gathering for nightly news, which comes on at 6:30. That is kind of the time that comes on on the East Coast. So we got the live shots. We're trying to gather in between, and then scripting and working with our producer to put that together and have that for nightly. Sometimes there's a nightly live shot, so we get ready for that, and then there's another round of live shots for the News Now programming. So anywhere between like 4 a.m. until maybe like 8 p.m. And then you get to your hotel and then you eat some dinner and then you start scripting for the next day. So that's in a nutshell when you have these big breaking news stories that warrant a big presence, a national presence. That's kind of how long a typical day can last or go.
And your live shots are fantastic. You are great at live shots, probably because you do them so much.
Yeah.
But I do want to know how the sausage is made a little bit in network news. Do you ever have a prompter? What are the live shots like? And any tips that you could give our listeners when they're doing their own live shots?
No, there's not a prompter, and I wish there was sometimes, especially when you're on like 2 hours of sleep, and you're bleary eyed. But at that point, you're so invested in the story, and hopefully you're really read in, so you know the story in and out, and just kind of comes naturally, hopefully. But repetition. I mean, in the beginning, I can tell you, like, live shots were extremely rough, and I was so nervous because, like, the element of live and just anything happening just kind of freaked me out. And I think depending on the assignment too, if it's a story that I have spent a lot of time on, and I want to just nail it and do a good job, you crank up the pressure, and I mean that never goes away. I mean, I think that kind of shows you that you still care about what you're doing, and you're invested in what you're doing. Um, but I think the best piece of advice, and this is something that I didn't have, starting off in the business, is this. Like, I mean, I feel like nowadays what I've noticed is like the younger generation coming up the ranks and coming out of J school and doing this and kind of following this path, they're so much more confident in front of the camera. And I think it's because of this, because this is what they were. I mean, they literally came out of the womb with their cell phone. I feel like they do selfies and videos and TikTok. So I've noticed like it comes more naturally to them, whereas it took me years to like be confident and comfortable in front of the camera. But I think kind of going back to the repetition, it's just like the more you do it, and just kind of, being in a moment of Zen. I know it just sounds kind of cheesy and cliche, but if there is just kind of a moment to just, the story, and just kind of being confident in yourself that you will be able to kind of nail it and get it right. But, for me, it's just kind of writing out bullets, and just, I like to speak out loud before a live shot, just to kind of like run through the things that I might say. For me, it just kind of sticks that way. And I'm very visual. So like, I just write bullet points. Sometimes I just handwrite it, and in that way it sticks for me when I have a lot of things to kind of rattle off.
Have you ever tried memorizing?
Depending on what I do need to memorize, because sometimes they're like stats and figures, and yeah, I mean, fortunately, I feel like maybe it's just because of I've been in so many different like high pressure situations, and like a lot of caffeine helps, and I'm just really good at memorizing like little facts like that. But I do have, fortunately, when we do these live shots, our crew is really good at just kind of giving us. I mean, I have something to put like my laptop or whatever to kind of have notes to look at, because I mean, listen, we're all human, and we kind of have brain farts sometimes, and we have to look at our notes.
Is there any moment of anxiety or anxiousness or any challenges that you have faced in your career as a journalist?
I think, I cover a lot of tragedies and disasters, and I think my heart sinks when I get a phone call or I see in my inbox a mass shooting. I think it's safe to say for all of us who do this, it's like the last thing we want to do, because we know what it entails. We're showing up at someone's worst nightmare, and we're sticking a camera in their face and asking them talk to us. I think that's the hardest part, and that gives me a lot of anxiety. And I feel like it's, as a journalist, you want to strike a balance of being empathetic and also building a wall, because you need to guard your heart, because the more you do this, I mean, like, you need to be strong enough to keep doing it and enduring it, because unfortunately, it's just the reality of the world that we live in. So yeah, I mean, I've covered my fair share of mass shootings across the country, and they're never easy. And I think there's a moment when when it's all said and done, I come home. It's just like I am just it just emotionally so taxing. I just have to just veg out and do nothing for like 2 days straight, because it is so hard to be in an environment like that and just be around so much grief and pain, and just kind of having these people open up to you.
Yeah, you make such a good point. It's that striking of the balance between being empathetic to what they're going through, but also being able to compartmentalize in some
Mhm.
ways, you know?
Right, right. And yeah, I mean, I don't, I think this is kind of, sadly, this is what we signed up for. And I think people ask me like, how do you keep doing it? And it's just, we just do, this is what we do as journalists. We share what's happening, whether it's heartbreak like that, or positive stories. And, I enjoyed those too, whenever I can get them. I love to kind of fill up my tank again, to kind of show that the world is not all bad. There are people who inspire and do good things.
Like when you interviewed the Queen of Country, Dolly Parton.
I know. I did that a couple of weeks ago, and that was amazing. Still kind of riding on this Dolly high. And so I live in Knoxville, Tennessee now, and living in the South. She is a queen. Everyone bows down to Dolly. You see her plastered just about everywhere. And believe it or not, she grew up not too far from Knoxville in Sevierville, which is about like an hour away from here. And it was just amazing to sit down with her, but also to see her like in her element because she can turn it on when when we're live and the spotlight's on her. But I think what also struck me is that there are a lot of people around Dolly. I mean, it was her people, Dollywood people, and then our people, and they're all kind of in this room together. But she was just so gracious and kind to everyone around her. And I think oftentimes people, it's when you meet your hero. Sometimes, like I've had moments where like they kind of let you down. Dolly did not let me down. She is just so wonderful, inside and out, and it's just she's given back on so many levels. It's just incredible, and just kind of prepping for the interview, I didn't realize she clearly is a powerhouse, but she has that heart of gold where she wants to give back on so many different levels, and she's touched so many lives as well. So it was just inspiring to kind of be in her presence, but also to be able to share her story and just the impact that she's had regionally, but really like across the country.
Ugh, I would love to see her perform.
I know, and I'm trying to think. She sang so prior to this, so she didn't sing for us during the interview, but she gave $1 million. So I covered Helene when it was like this awful hurricane that came through, and it hit in the woods, essentially in the mountains, and you don't expect like the remnants of a hurricane to end up in this part of the country, but it affected part of her community. So she gave $1 million and for the recovery efforts. And I saw her and I asked her a question. But in any case, she gave a performance and she still got it. She
Mm,
still got it. I mean, she's a gem, and I was just so lucky and blessed to talk to her.
I love that. Is there a news moment or news story that really stands out in your mind that you just remember covering?
I think collectively, I know at the national level, it's so macro, but the stories that kind of stick out to me, it's like after the fact because and there are things we get notes or emails from people we interview and we don't realize the impact we had on their lives. Just like, for example, it was not too long ago, I did a story in Raleigh, North Carolina. It was about like backyard chickens, but the family kind of opened up to our producer and was saying that their young daughter who I interviewed, she was nervous and not super confident about doing it. She was very young, but she wrote to our producer saying just how much that moment meant to her. So it just kind of touched my heart because I just, you don't necessarily get feedback like that. I feel like oftentimes media is always portrayed as like, the enemy. So when you get positive feedback and realize you're making an impact, even if it's a small impact, it's just super rewarding.
How important is it that you see Asian American representation more so on the television screen today?
Yeah, I think we've come a long way. I think we could do more because I mean, when I go to a lot of these conferences, Asian American Journal Association conference, which I go to pretty much every year. Yes, it seems like there are a lot, but in the grand scheme of things, I mean, there aren't a lot of correspondents
Right.
like myself. There are probably a handful, and I think not just Asian Americans, but people from all backgrounds and cultures. I think it's so important to have them in the newsroom because they come from different perspectives. And like, for example, like I'm a product of immigrants who didn't speak English, as I was growing up, but I can offer a different perspective, I guess you can say, when it comes to storytelling, especially, it's going back to sadly a tragedy, but there was a shooting in Monterey Park, and I was sent out there to cover that because it was a large Asian population. But I think when someone like myself is there and kind of the journalist who's holding the microphone and asking them to open up, they feel more comfortable sometimes because they see someone who looks like them. So in that regard, I think it's able to kind of break the ice a little bit, especially in communities where a lot of people English is not their first language. So it helps to have another language under your belt. I can speak Korean. I can communicate in that regard. But like I said, just kind of being able to relate, just seeing someone who looks like you can also help in the storytelling and the journalism.
I've heard that before. That's such a good point. You just had a milestone birthday,
Yeah,
right?
I
You
did.
just turned 40.
I know, which is crazy, crazy.
What does success mean to you at this point in your life?
Oh man, I mean, I feel like I'm so blessed with everything that's happened. I've been so fortunate that been able to take this career to where it is now. I honestly, when I was, I look back when I was a student at University of Maryland, never in my wildest dream would I think one day I would call Al Roker my colleague, right? He's someone that I watched as a young girl on the Today Show, and even having a seat at Studio 1A, and my first day at 30 Rock when I had like a long stint of just covering like bad winter storm after bad winter storm when I first landed in New York. And then finally they pulled me out of the field to like do a story in the studio. And I was like, finally. And then it was Savannah and Hoda tossing to me. And it was just kind of like an out of body experience. It's one of those things you just never forget. And I'm just so blessed that I had and I continue to have moments like that, being at this level. But I think that's success. I have my health. I have a beautiful husband, a caring husband, a supportive husband. I have a dog that we just got, Knox, who just turned 1. Um, and a great fulfilling career that keeps me busy and on my toes, and I'm just so fortunate to learn so much and meet different people and connect with people like yourself. Had it not been the career that I chose, I might not get to have all these experiences.
Can you walk me through your first day at the Today Show?
Yeah, I feel like there were two moments that stand out. There was like my very first day, which was like a weekend shift, because when you start off, you kind of, you work the weekends. It is what it is. It was like a weekend Today shift. And it's just so it was just so wild, and it's all kind of dizzying when I look back, and I just remember that because I was living in New York. They pick you up in a car, and they whisk you away to hair and makeup, so you do hair and makeup, so all that is happening. And then I'm kind of reading up on the story that I'm supposed to be presenting that day, whatever it was, and I don't remember what it was. And then making sure everything is right, making sure there were no overnight updates. And if sometimes it's such a scramble, they're like, they need a retrack, and you just have to scramble to retrack it. And this is all happening like within an hour's time. So everything is so fast paced. Things are just coming at you. So that was my first, I think, time in the studio. But a memorable time was when I was on like during the weekday with Savannah and Hoda after like a really crazy stint covering winter storms. I was finally not freezing in the comfort of a studio, and then I remember like the floor manager, the director, just kind of asking me to come in. They mic you up, so like another scramble. Everything just moves so fast because you have hits. Other correspondents following you right after your live shot in the studio, so they're miking you up, making sure you can hear right, and there you're just kind of standing there during a commercial break, and then they're like, Kathy, let's have you come in, and then like they sit you down, and then you just have out all the lights on you. But it's not just the lights. You have Savannah, Hoda, and then the audience, like the window that's right behind them. You see all the fans just kind of like gawking at
Yeah.
everyone in the studio. So it's just like literally all these eyeballs on you, and then this is like your first time and you really want to nail it, and then you're just like, where do I look, because there's cameras everywhere. But it was just I just remember how warm the anchors were when I was there for the first time because they clearly saw that I was probably nervous and just freaking out a little bit. But they just made things so comfortable. Just even like the small banter right before they tossed to me. They made me feel like part of the family. So that was just a memorable moment. And like I said, and just seeing Al Roker over there, who I grew up watching, it was just surreal.
All right, Kathy, are you ready for the quick fires?
Yes, give it to me.
All right. If I weren't a journalist, I would be blank.
Um, you know, I know it's kind of cheesy, but I don't think I would choose any other career. Like I said,
Wow.
like I said, I've been really blessed at how things have turned out, and um, a lot of doors have opened up for me, and I can't see myself doing anything else. Honestly, it's been quite a journey, and it's not over yet.
I love that answer. Nobody's answered that yet. I love it.
Okay.
Your coffee order.
Ooh, I'm on this. So I
You
Starbucks.
said you drink a lot of caffeine, so you got to have
I
something.
do. I'm trying to, pull back. So when I'm not drinking, coffee, it's matcha, but Starbucks is kind of like our go-to, and I wasn't paid to say that. But when you're on the road, it's sometimes like breakfast, lunch, and dinner because when you're out and kind of in remote areas, that's all they have, and it's kind of healthy, and you got the caffeine. In any case, I get a cortado. It's like the brown sugar oat milk cortado, so it's small. I think it
Yes.
comes with like 3 shots of espresso, but I do like half decaf and then just 1 pump of the brown sugar syrup. But it's
Oh,
just like just enough kick to kind of keep me going. And I try not to do another round. I just do like tea afterwards because I can be too wired and like I do need to sleep at some point.
yeah, exactly. Your favorite travel destination?
I love Mexico. It's easy to get to. I love Mexican food. I love street tacos and margaritas. And good weather. I feel like every time I go to Mexico, it never fails me. And we had our honeymoon in Puerto Vallarta, so Mexico is a special place in my heart.
Your favorite restaurant?
I'm a big foodie, but you know, going back to Mexican food, I mean, I love all Mexican cuisine. So street tacos, I mean, that's kind of like my dish. But anything Mexican. On the road, you can usually find a good Mexican restaurant.
Yeah, you travel so much. It's
No,
like
it's like, I mean, I have like my go-tos here, but like I said, I mean, everything I can eat it. I can eat it all. I can eat it all.
something people often get wrong about you.
They think because of what I do, I'm an extrovert, but I would consider myself an introvert. I think, give me a good, I don't know, book or movie, Netflix, and I will binge and just kind of stay to myself all weekend if I had a choice.
All the introverts. We're
Yeah,
all the introverts.
I
All of
know.
us. Everyone I interview is an introvert. I
Really?
swear. Yeah, we're all introverts. We all have to like prepare because we have such like outgoing jobs that I
Right.
think afterwards, then we just have to like retreat, right?
Yeah, it's like we got to fill our tank again. So
The last movie, TV show, or book you watched and loved.
I just saw Mission Impossible, and it's a winner. Listen, love him or hate him, Tom Cruise is still a stud in my book. I think the last movie that I saw prior to this at the theater was Top Gun, and also Tom Cruise. He's a great actor. He can deliver, and he puts on a good show, and I'm willing to pay for it.
My husband wants to watch Mission Impossible so badly. So we have a daughter. So getting to the movie theater is just like non-existent right now because she's so young.
Well, yeah, I was gonna
It's
say
like
my
we have to hire a babysitter to go to a 3 hour movie. So it's like,
yeah,
okay, let's shell out hundreds of dollars and then go see our movie. It doesn't feel worth it at this point to us. But I
I'm sure.
told him, I'm like, if you really want it, you can go by yourself, get some popcorn, go see Mission Impossible. I will stay
Yeah,
here and you can have your joy and your
yeah.
silence for 3 hours.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's an investment. It does take a lot. I mean, it was 3 hours. It was like a
Yeah.
good chunk of our day, but it was well worth it.
A snapshot of an ordinary everyday moment that gives you true joy.
Walking my dog. I was not a dog person. No, actually, I take that back. I didn't grow up with dogs. So all of this is kind of new to me. And
Mm.
just being responsible for little Knox, and just kind of having to do that has been really nice.
Aw, he's your little family member now.
Yeah, just the simple things in life.
If you could switch lives with one person for a day, who would it be?
Ooh, I'm curious what my husband does. He comes, he works just as hard as I do. So he's a federal prosecutor. So he sees some crazy things too, and I hear things just like on the sidelines. He can't disclose too much, but it'd be nice to kind of see what his world is like. And he knows so much about my world, and obviously because he can see me and where I am in the world by just turning on the news, but I don't necessarily have a full idea of what his day looks like. So I think it'd be kind of neat to kind of swap roles and have some fun.
Interesting. One thing you're deeply grateful for right now.
Um, I think just the situation that I'm in. I think NBC has been really good to me in the sense I get to live in Knoxville, Tennessee with my husband because I'm a bit of an anomaly. A lot of these correspondents live in major cities, New York, Miami, LA, Chicago, and they saw the value in having me in a region that's kind of considered a dead zone. Like oftentimes I'm able to beat some of the crews because they happen in such remote areas in the South. And I'm like 2 hours away, so I'm able to drive pretty quickly. So I think just, I'm able to kind of strike somewhat of a work-life balance. I'm able to have a home base here. It's nice because amid all the chaos that I do for work, I have a safe space when I come home, and it's obviously not New York, it's Knoxville, so it's a lot quieter. So it gives me a lot of peace, and I kind of need that, especially in the job that we have.
I love that. If you could go back in time to when you first started your career, what piece of advice would you give yourself?
I would say stay the course, because it all will work out. At the time, I didn't know what the next day, the next year would bring. I think oftentimes you kind of live and die by your contracts, and you just don't know where the next market or the next move would be. But like I said, I've been really blessed to have opportunities open up for me. I'm not going to say it wasn't challenging. I definitely had a lot of hardships. I mean, it takes a lot of hard work to be in this position and to be in this industry, but I've just been really lucky to see kind of everything pan out the way it did. I think it's just so important to stay hungry and curious, and it's so important, I think now more than ever, to keep this industry alive. I think we're competing against a lot of influencers and people who think they're journalists, and people are consuming news in so many different ways and on their own time, and they don't know fact from fiction, and just I worry about that because for me I know where I'm getting my source, right, and how I'm presenting the news. Whereas people whoever might be watching TikTok or Instagram or Facebook, it might not be true, and I just am concerned about that shift and just how people consume news and where they get it. And I think it's still so important now more than ever to do what we do and keep this industry alive because and hold power accountable and just making sure we get the facts straight and yeah, and just keeping the foundations of journalism alive.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. You are such an inspiration to
Oh,
so many journalists out there. You really are. Where can people follow you if they want to follow your social media accounts or watch you on air?
yeah, it's so bad. I don't even remember my Instagram handle. I have to like look it up. What is it these days? It's Kathy Park TV is my Instagram handle. I'm on X as well. And then I contribute to all the NBC platforms. So Today's Show, Nightly News, MSNBC, and News Now. So stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Thank you, Kathy. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me on.